Hi, everyone. Back to the show. Welcome back to the show. I have our next guest on the show. It is Leanna. Is that correct?
Yeah, Leanna.
Leanna
Dr.
Wolfe.
Leanna Wolfe. Yeah.
Yeah. Leanna, thank you so much for being on.
Mhm.
Uncomfortable being comfortable being uncomfortable. I swear it gets so backwards sometimes. I think I'm dyslexic, then I just never get my words right. um, Thank you for being on with us. We have a couple of topics we'd love to go over with you today. We want to get to know a little bit more about you. I kind of really want to know what led you to study traditional polygamy in African and Papua New Guinea.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about your how did you get your book title, 177 Lovers and Counting, My Sex, My Life as a Sex Researcher. I really love that title, so we'll get into that. How has the Me Too movement impacted gender relations and dating, which is really good in times today? Um, and how can understanding one's sexual history influence one's current outlook on sex and relationships, which I think is really great that we dive into. So, Leanna, let us know a little bit about yourself, your background, and what is so fascinating and wonderful about you.
Okay. Well, I was raised by New Yorkers in California. I grew
Okay.
up in the San Francisco Bay Area in Palo Alto, which at the time was where Hewlett Packard started and eventually became the home of Google and Facebook. But
Nice.
back when I was growing up, it wasn't yet Silicon Valley. It was at best Stanford Industrial Park. And my dad
Right.
was actually an engineer.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm growing up in basically as the sexual revolution is emerging, I become a young person, and
Mm-hmm.
and feminism is emerging when I'm a teen. And so all of that had a huge impact on my worldview as I was trying to figure out what kind of person I was going to be. And
Yeah.
I heard about anthropology when I was about 11, and my sense of what anthropology was you got to live in remote places and practice some version of participant observation where you um, lived with the natives and through living with them you figured out all kinds of things about the grand human experience. And
Right.
that's what I did. I pursued anthropology. And then
Oh.
along the way, as a young woman, I was trying to figure out sex, as everybody is trying to as they're growing up. I
Sure.
sensed there was a
Yeah.
lot of energy there, and I wanted to know how it worked. And initially all I did was try to read books. And but I wasn't like there weren't probably a lot of um direct books about sex and that at the time. Eventually Our Bodies Ourselves came out and things like that, but the books that I chased down were ethnographic reports by an anthropologist named Oscar Lewis, who was
Hmm.
describing Mexican peasant women. And somehow the way he was talking about how they managed their bodies and their sexualities was gave me some insight that I really enjoyed. And so that was sort of how I educated myself. And then as a young woman, I was basically living in Berkeley in the early 70s and being a student there. And
Mhm.
the information we kept hearing was things like an essay called The Myth of the Vaginal Orgasm. And
Mhm.
it kind of challenged what Freud was saying, in that Freud claimed that mature women had had vaginal orgasms and teenagers had clitoral orgasms, and none of this made any sense to me. And then
Yeah.
Cher Hite went on and wrote and conducted survey research to establish that 70% of women did not have orgasms through intercourse. And I just didn't. And so all of this was just buzzing around as I'm like trying to figure out my own body and what is an orgasm. And I certainly wanted to figure that out as fast as I could. And so I was in a feminist women's consciousness raising group, and I started asking the members of the group, well, how do you access orgasm? And one of them, and this was before the days that vibrators were very available. And so
Right.
one of the women said, well, if you get in your bathtub and run a stream of warm water and put your crotch under the spigot and just sit there or lie there, it'll happen. And she was right. It happened. And I was like, whoa, so this is it. I get it. And then I had a boyfriend and I wanted him to know what it was since we obviously weren't having it together, at
Right.
least what it was for me. So I made him come in the bathroom and watch it happen. But we never
Sounds
figured out
right.
how to have an orgasm together.
Oh no.
I mean, it was just we were young. There was limited
Yeah.
information. There, he was my first partner. He'd only had one other partner before me. There would just wasn't um there wasn't an internet. There, it was
Yeah.
so I, in so as I wrote my book, these memories became part of my sex history. And
Hmm.
I realized that in putting together my sex history, which was an assignment I gave my anthropology of sex students, was that they were to recall all these kinds of memories. And most of them, all they would report on is the first time they had intercourse.
Right.
And they only reported on heterosexual intercourse. They penile-vaginal. They didn't report on any other activities. So this led me to realize that my whole life I've been conducting research, however
Hmm.
I could. And this research included living in small villages in Mexico, in India, in Papua New Guinea, in East Africa, many places, and embedding myself in these places and absorbing their life ways and their ideas about partnering and about relationship and, certainly about sexuality.
Wow. And that leads to our next question. Your so give us a background. People probably know what polygamy is, but your definition of what polygamy is, and how does
Oh,
that
polygamy.
kind of
Well,
transpire to
polygamy
what
is a blanket term for a
Mhm.
multiple partner marriage. And there's two
Okay.
kinds of polygamy. There's polygyny and polyandry. And
Hmm.
polygyny would be one husband with multiple wives, which is the most
Okay.
common form. And then there's
Yeah.
polyandry, which is a wife with multiple husbands. And oftentimes those situations occur amongst folks where many brothers are sharing the same wife, so to sustain a family farm, like
Wow.
in Tibet, in some of the highlands of Tibet. It's not a very common form. You know, w- Amongst the cultures of the world, something like 85% of them do have the possibility of practicing polygamy. Um, Usually it works out that only about 20% of the males end up being able to afford it.
I can
And
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, you need to have resources. You need to be charismatic enough to cause other women to believe you have resources, and then
Yeah.
often you're putting them to work to generate those resources so that more women may want to marry into your family.
And why
So,
is it so big here in the States? Like, what is the reasoning behind it being illegal? I guess
okay,
in certain.
here we don't tip, it's basically multiple partner marriage is illegal in the States. Even
Mm,
though 85% of the cultures of the world allow it, nonetheless, it's only about a third of the world population lives in such cultures. So most of the Western world, it's illegal. And, if someone engages in some form of multiple partner sexuality, it's probably some version of cheating,
but
or
are they
it
just
could
doing it
be
there?
polyamory. And,
But
and,
is it what
yeah.
people are normally doing anyway? Like, I mean, in an animal world, you have the male lion who has many lions. This is a kind of a more
Yeah.
primal
Oh,
human instinct
absolutely.
that,
You're absolutely right. It's a standard behavior amongst animals. And ultimately, humans are animals, and we see more polygyny in contexts where there is sexual dimorphism, meaning the male is larger and different in body size from the female. So,
Mm,
gorillas are routinely polygynous, as are chimpanzees. Humans
yeah.
are polygynous as well. But then we need to consider religion, and much of
Mm,
Christianity imposed a sexual morality that prescribed monogamy. And
mm,
monogamy is being married to one other person. Now, much of the monogamy that was practiced in, let's say, the Middle Ages included having sexual affairs. And I remember reading Montaigne said that it was really droll and weird for somebody to enjoy having sex with their spouse. The people that they thought having sex that would be exciting were their lovers. And so humans,
wow.
for a very long time have had multiple partners. And it's only in, just recent times that monogamy became an expectation. And much of the expectation of monogamy refers to what happened here in the Americas, especially North America, where you had all
Right.
these Europeans who came from households where only the eldest son inherited the family business or the family farm, and because he
Hmm.
inherited it, he could have a wife. But the remaining brothers had no inheritance, and so they basically became some version of a gigolo, where they, were just lovers of various women and
Right.
never could have a family of their own. So think about all these guys migrating to the Americas, not recognizing Indian land rights,
Mm,
and each getting a parcel and being able to have a farm. Suddenly,
wow.
monogamy becomes the rule because each of them can afford a wife and a farm.
That simple.
And
Wow.
so we're the grand experiment in monogamy. That's
We
what
are.
we inherited from the colonists.
And
But
what
it's
did you
not.
discover?
And so even much of Europe is much more relaxed than America is
Sure.
regarding sexual affairs. We're the ones who are so moralistic about it.
Yeah, yeah, it happens. Affairs happen all the time. What did you discover, when you were there in Africa and Papua New Guinea? Like, when you were doing your studies, like, how were you assimilating and understanding this compared to what
Yeah. Well,
was it Western
basically I
civilization?
came there with a research problem because And that's the best way to come if you want to do research, is have
Yes.
a problem you're trying to address. And my problem was very
Yeah.
personal. What had happened is I'd been with a partner, a guy, for about 4 years, and we
Hmm.
were doing reasonably well. We were raising his daughter, and we had some animals, and we had a home together. And
Sure.
then at some point, he decided that I because I that I was having an affair with somebody. Um, and it was just somebody who I was invited to go to some research seminar with. And I
Right.
came back, I was really excited, and I says, "Oh, I found out this and that and whatever." And he was convinced that that gave him, that confirmed that he should be able to take a lover as well. So he
Whoa.
got involved with a woman who actually believed that because he was getting involved with her, that he was planning to leave me. And he was just
Oh.
jump starting it by getting involved with her. So suddenly I'm in a situation where I'm trying to share my partner with another woman.
Mm.
And I there poly this was, polyamory had emerged as a name and a topic that small groups of people chatted about. Most people hadn't heard of it. Not like today, where there's been cover stories in major magazines and newspapers about it. But back
Right.
then, it was fairly unknown. And when I spoke to a person or two about it, they were trying to impose all these rules and expectations about how I and my partner and this other woman should behave. And,
Oh.
and so anyway, I says, I want to go to a part of the world where they've been doing this for millennia, where, it's a long-standing tradition, and see how
Yeah.
they manage it. So that's what drew me to Africa. And so I came there and I said, well, how can I share my husband with this other woman? How do you do it? And so everybody gave me advice. Some of them said, well, you should, it's going to take some time. It's not an easy thing, but, find your way to incorporate her into your household. You can raise your children together. You can both, try to have a good family life together. And then at the same time I was there, it just so happened that Bill Clinton had been discovered to be having this affair with Monica Lewinsky. It was like
Oh,
1998.
wow.
And so
Wow.
they were weighing in on that. And they were saying things like, you know, the American president has only one daughter, and a man of his stature should have a son. Now, that woman, Hillary, she looks like she's too old to have more children. But that girl, Monica, she's definitely fertile. She should be able to have a son for the president. And so that was their sense of, here's an opportunity for this man to build his legacy by having a son. And why
Yeah.
should he be shunned in any way for doing that? So much of my time in Africa was taking on a very different worldview.
That's amazing.
And in New
And
Guinea, go ahead.
oh no, I was saying that's so surreal, but also it's so understandable, and it's almost the fact that
Absolutely.
we get this whole kind of stuck upness of, oh, it has to be this way, and listen, I'm not saying you should go out and cheat on your spouse, but I think there needs to be a level of communication, understanding. I also think these are things that's happened many years ago. We've seen this happen with President Kennedy and Jackie O, and all these other things, like all these great famous men who were doing these things, and it's crazy to either shun them or treat them differently for doing something that they feel they had to do. I mean, I think it's always great to have that conversation with your spouse, but I also think it's not wrong to feel that way about something, but then being
Yeah, and
ostracized for it. And
things
the whole,
have
and the whole
changed
trial,
too.
yeah, and the whole trial thing, I'm sorry, I don't know what that had to do with him being a president and him
had
getting a blowjob from
nothing to do
it
with
had
him being
nothing
a
to do with his
president.
job. Like, oh, national security. What? How many people come into that Oval Office all the time? Like, what does it matter? What does it matter?
Right.
Why do you want to impeach them for
Yeah.
that? I don't. I
Yeah,
don't. I
and
never got that.
our morality as a society has bounced all over the place. Gary
Oh my
Hart,
God.
would have become a president. He was a stellar leader, but because he was discovered to be having this affair with some other woman, he basically stepped out of the race. But then when
Wow.
Bill Clinton was fingered about this stuff before while he was running for office, it shifted and
Hmm.
he became president anyway. It basically made him an interesting guy.
Very true.
And,
Very true.
look at Donald Trump with his history.
Oh,
And, they
Lord
were
Jesus.
trying to cover up that he had paid for sex, but he's done so much more than that. And, it was
Yeah.
like all the counts that there are against him. And yet, Americans are really a curious culture.
Wow. That's
So
really.
anyway, back to Papua New Guinea. So they
Yeah.
too had a long tradition of polygamy, but they practice or polygyny, but they practice it quite differently than in Africa. Because in
Hmm.
Africa, at least the villages I was living in amongst the Luo in Kenya, the
Hmm.
husband had a rotated sleeping schedule where every couple of nights he slept with a different one of his wives in her hut. And there would be a
Oh.
circle of huts and he would rotate. Now, in New Guinea, they believe that men should not have too much contact with women because if a woman is on her period and he has contact with the blood, that could
Hmm.
disable him. It could weaken him and he would not be a functional man. Likewise,
Wow.
women are told that they should never spend any time in what were the men's houses because there would be all these nocturnal emissions and semen would be debilitating for women to
It's like
be
you're
around
wasting
too
it.
much of it.
You're wasting it. It should be used for reproducing. Wow. That's
Yeah, right.
very interesting.
So anyway, they basically had separate houses. So the men, from 6 years on up, slept with all the other men. They built a fire and all slept together in their house. And the women
Right.
and the young children and the daughters slept in the women's houses. And so, of course, being a precocious anthropologist, I had to say, well, where are you having sex? Because obviously you are reproducing.
Yeah. Right.
Because if you can't be in her house and you can't be in his house, where's it happening? And they
Is it like
said,
a special hut
"Oh,
they have? A special building they would do it?
no, no.
No.
Their main diet is sweet potato. And it's a great diet. It's full of nutrition and
Right.
energy. And so they said, well, in the late afternoons in the sweet potato garden.
And the sweet potato garden. Hmm. That's a different outlook for me now. Okay. Good to know. Interesting.
Okay.
That's amazing. And how did you get your title for your book? Did that
The
come after
title,
your?
oh, that's hilarious. So what
Yeah.
happened was I'd been teaching anthropology a good long time, something like 37 years. And
Hmm.
at around 2018, I'd had it. My students were so addicted to their phones, they could not pay attention. They'd much rather watch a show like yours than pay attention to me. And so I just decided I'd retire and pursue other things. So
Hmm.
one of the things I wanted to do was finish this book that had been on the back burner of my laptop. And this was the book on my life as a sex researcher. And I thought, well, I need structure, so I'm going to join a writing group. So I joined this daytime writing group, and it turned out everybody in the group was a hair older than me and had grown up quite
Right.
differently. One of them, I think she was from Iran, and she was in an arranged marriage. And another one was married her high school sweetheart. So what happened is they kept listening. I'd tell them, write essays that would lead to parts of my book, and they'd be rolling their eyes and kind of not really sure what to make of me. And, sometimes they says, "Oh, you're writing something like the 50 Shades of Grey." And I said,
Oh wow.
they just did not know what I was up to, because I
Right.
was like writing a fair amount about polyamory and about cheating and all these many things I'd studied.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point I just said, I know they're trying to figure me out, so I'm just going to give them a number. And so I wrote an essay called 177 Lovers and Counting. And
Now, this isn't your
then,
actual number of lovers. You just
no,
counted a
no, it's
number.
an approximate
Yeah, no
number.
judgment, no shaming,
I
no
never
judgment, no
really
shame.
kept track.
I don't know how
You know,
anyone would
I,
keep track. 177? I mean, I'm sure it's probably been done, but that's a
yeah,
lot.
well, people do keep track, but I
Ugh.
had, it was approximate. I assessed, okay, let's say I've been sexually active for 45 years. And
Sure.
maybe every year that I was single, I dated 3 or 4 people that led to having sex with them. So
Hmm.
that adds up pretty fast. If you just,
It's
and
true.
that's not
Yeah.
even being promiscuous. That's not,
Yeah.
if there's such a term. It's not, if I add, when I considered that I'd had open relationships, that I'd done bit of swinging, that I'd been single and dated a
Hmm.
fair amount while I was single, all of that, added to a number around that. But what
Wow.
happened is the group leader thought that I was being provocative, and
Oh,
that I was trying to get attention from everybody, and that I wasn't seriously trying to improve my writing. And so
right.
she asked me to leave the group, but I kept the
Wow.
title.
I would too. I mean, it's a commanding title, and it's catchy. And I don't know if provocative is the word to use, but it's more of like it's like I'm engaged and I'm interested to know, because I'm thinking, like I said to myself, I can even tell you the number of people I've probably been. Oh God, hopefully maybe it's not that number. But I think ideally it's like, wow, that's very interesting to go through
Well,
that. And
it
I
also,
understand that.
yeah, also, like, think about when I came up. It was
Hmm.
the year I
Yes.
started having intercourse was the year that Roe versus Wade became the law of the land. So
Wow.
I always had backup if there was an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah.
And birth control was widely available. AIDS
Hmm.
had not yet hit the scene.
Right.
So basically, sex was safe. You, you know,
Mm, yeah.
one could explore there, and all those ideas from like the 50s of a tarnished reputation for having too many partners, it just didn't exist. So
Yeah.
I was like, basically lived in a time that's not at all like today.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Because a
amazing.
lot of young folks today are buried in their phones, and they do
Yeah.
not have the ease of m- connecting with others with touch and all the things that we did. And
Right.
so it's very different.
It is. It's way different. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, because I feel like dating nowadays, and we'll get into that, it's very hard to really connect. And that actually takes to our next topic. The Me Too movement has happened, and obviously, gender relations, and obviously a lot of things that happen with women and consensual sex and this and that. But it's kind of like, how do you move forward after such a movement, but also stay respectful, but also broaden your sexual knowledge and I wouldn't say history, but I guess awakening, because for some people, it's got to be not easy to make this level of understanding, because I do think some people get bored. They stay with their
Mhm.
partners for a certain reason, and that's just
Mhm.
what it is. Or some are afraid to branch out and look out, and they feel an affair is a way to do it. And you realize in the day, however way you reach your sexual prowess, um, hopefully you're learning something through the process. At least you're learning something maybe you didn't think was okay. And I think a lot for men, it was more of like, because women were such objects. Women were always something that you could fantasize about, you could sexualize, you can just do what you want to with them, and that's it, and not realize these are people too. But then also for women, I I would hope that it's more of like you could be a woman and still have your sexual proudness, still be okay with that, and not be considered a slut, a hoe, you know, a Jezebel. I don't know why I love that word,
Right, right.
but it's like nowadays. Hopefully, that's changed to the point where like it's just consensual sex with two people, and you understand each other, and actually be okay with if something's not working for you, then say something, speak up, or
Right.
text it to your
And
partner. I don't really
it's,
know how to do today.
that sounds well and good, but a lot of this is still very delicate.
It is. It
And,
definitely.
I did a survey on orgasm maybe about 10 years ago. And what
Mhm.
came up was that the folks who were the most likely to either be trying to start a family and thus meet
Mhm.
a partner to start a family with, or had young children, or were sort of in their those middle years around their 30s or
Yeah.
late 20s were the biggest orgasm fakers because they had so much
Wow.
other agenda going on because they wanted to
It
keep
was
that
almost like
relationship going,
does it
or
feel
they
like it was just a
wanted
chore?
no,
Does
what
it
it
feel
was is that it wasn't a chore thing. It just ha- wasn't uh the orgasm or, fulfillment wasn't the high priority. Getting
wow.
or keeping the relationship was. So the less they
Mm.
rattled about, hey, you need to do this and that, or this isn't working,
Right.
or could we try these things, or any of that was just on the back burner because they just wanted to keep things smooth and going and staying and keeping the relationship going. And they
Wow.
probably thought that too much conversation about critiquing what was happening would cause a nascent relationship to end.
That's very true. You can't bruise a lot, especially a lot and as a male, I think it's a lot of bruising egos, and it's more of like a okay, I'm not satisfied. Well, I could find another girl that can. And it's like, well, technically, you probably
Right,
still can't. But ideally, I see your argument on that because it's like, yeah, you don't want to do that, or you don't want to tell your female partner that she's doesn't know what she's doing. But I did have a friend one time. I had to tell him. I said, listen, if sex is becoming almost an injury, you might want to speak up and say something if she's doing something that's not great for you. Regardless how great of a girl she is. But it is those
right,
awkward conversations you have to
right. And
have, and
it's like more when we're in a time of abundance that
yeah,
we can um, speak up for ourselves
yeah,
or, explore things because there's not so, people in their teens and 20s are much more likely to be honest about it these days because
sure,
there's a lot
yeah,
more communication and a lot more information out there. And
yes, true.
also, older folks have a lot less to lose, and they may be more able to talk about it as well. Another project I got involved with was a project related to consent, and what it
Hmm.
was called was oh, I'm so worn out on this. Just a second. It was changing perspectives on sexual assault.
Oh, okay,
And
all right.
so what I was finding was that millennials processed very differently than boomers. So,
Hmm.
if you ask them, what does no mean no mean? No means no. And for
Yeah.
the boomers, they thought it meant that the no could convert to a maybe and that the maybe could convert to a yes. And it was all part of seduction. Where in most of consent training, no means no means that's it. Forget it. I'm not
Done.
interested and don't even try.
Yeah.
And so, with that kind of conversation going, a lot of young men are being left out in the cold. Because if a young woman says no, he knows better than to push.
Right.
Even
Right.
though some of these women in their heart of hearts probably do want to be seduced, but the
Yeah.
culture doesn't allow it. The culture
No.
says you have to be straightforward. And I've spoken to some attractive young women. They basically said, if I'm interested, I'll let them know.
Yeah.
They should
I
not
agree.
try to hit on me at all.
No. You're definitely right. I see it in the clubs sometimes, and it's just so sleazy. And I get it. You want a connection. You want to feel connected. I mean, but also it's, there's other outlets for that. I think, as you mentioned earlier, there's so much other technology and places to go. There's different places to have that happen where you don't have to feel like you have to succumb to that. But I think, guys rally each other up sometimes. And I see this a lot with some of my friends. And it's like, you know, it's okay to go out and talk to a girl, but as you said, if she says no, she says no. But more like, oh, well, your boy's egging you on. I'm like, well, no, just tell him to fuck off. I'm like, no, move on. It's not the end of the world. There's always someone out there for someone. I know people hate that saying, but it's so true. There's always someone out there for you that fits your mood and who you are and what you like and what you don't like. And as hard as it is, it can happen. But if you harp on your past or you harp on past relationships that's not worked, it's never going to help you move forward to find what you're supposed to be finding in your relationships.
Right.
But that's my 2
Well, the
cents.
thing that's really tricky for me is that I came of age at a time where seduction was expected.
No, I could see.
And
Yeah.
so I didn't, even though I got harassed plenty and I just thought that was just how it was. And there was
Yeah.
nothing much you could do about it. If you're a young, attractive woman, you're just going to get whistled at and hooted at and grabbed
Right.
and yelled. And that's just how it was. But at the same time, because I was so used to just shutting it off, if someone did want my attention and I ultimately considered them valuable, I
Yeah.
expected them to push and for
Yeah.
them to be able to convert my no into a maybe and my
Mm-hmm.
maybe into a yes. And
You.
because I
It
could
sounds so
never
much.
dream in a yes
Yeah.
on my own.
I mean, it reminds me of the song "Baby It's Cold Outside," where he's persistently trying to get this girl to come home with him, and you're just kind of like, "Sir, she does not want to go home with you. Let this woman go home. Like, what are you doing?" And then they changed the lyrics in one of the songs now, where now you can't say that because everything's going on.
Because
So
it's too pushy.
it's too pushy now. But I do agree with you. Like, I watch a lot of. I'm such a film buff with older films, and I see that. And at the time, early 20s, 30s, 40s, like you seen that was the case. It's like the girl would get all dolled up. She would wait for him to do something. There was a proper way of doing that. And he didn't do anything reaction. She would think she did something wrong. And it's just kind of like the aggression he had with her. And you're just like, wow, that was a different time of things happening,
Yeah.
compared to.
And that is a culture of
Yeah.
seduction. And
Yes.
at that time, that's what we humans did. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's so tricky now is, I have clients coming into my office, especially young men who
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to behave right and they
Yeah.
cannot
Sure.
get the attention of young women because
I
the
think because
women are all sitting high on their thrones,
oh,
acting
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
nothing is good enough for them. And all this obnoxious behavior should not be responded to. But they're actually lonely as well.
Yeah. It's almost putting the front up of trying to shield yourself, but at the same time, you're
Right.
just preventing yourself from finding someone that can be. Not that everyone's, I think the problem is we have to stop putting people to this point of saying, oh, because, all men are sleazeballs. Not all men are sleazeballs, obviously. People find connections with people, whatever the case is, but you can't be so high on yourself and kind of just be like, I'm going to be so much better, but then close yourself off to being with someone else or someone connecting to you. I see that so many times with my friends in relationships, and I sit back and I observe, and I'm just like, the reasons this isn't working for you because you're not learning from these past relationships. Which goes into my next question is, how can understanding one's sexual history influence one's current outlook on sex and relationships? Because I do feel like that's very crucial and key. And for myself as well, is how to get better at your relationships and learn from these things. Because I mean, honest. I mean, like you said earlier, I don't think I was a sexual prowess person when I came out. Like I knew what I was doing. It's probably wham bam, thank you, ma'am, all right, whatever. But now you've learned things over the years. You've had different relationships. You had different aspects of what sex is. You had different expectations of what relationships are. You got to take those things and move those to your relationship so that you grow. And while you're in your relationship, it's okay to still continue growing. It's not like, okay, I got a relationship, it's going to stop, but it's like, no, you can still teach yourself and learn things and be okay with that. But I think so people, back to our early conversation, it gets so hard and it just kind of stays stuck. And it's just so sad to see that sometimes because it's like, you can really do so much more for yourself. I mean, that's why we have sex therapy. That's why we have different lessons. That's why we have different things to look into. That's why some people are into things. I have friends that are into role playing for them and, them. I'm like, okay, if that works for you, that works for you. Some are into other things, but it's whatever works for you. I think the problem too is our society I think we talked a little about this before. It's like kinks and fetishes and whatever case is, they put this kind of spin of no, you can't, a very Puritan way of like, no, you can't do this. But actually, that actually helps a lot of people in introspect. And also, everyone's a little kinky one way or another. You may not think so,
I would think
but
so.
you are. You are.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
basically, what we could say about kink is that it's really helped communication. Because if you're
Yes,
doing really standard stuff, maybe you think you just sort of go they read you and you read them and there's nothing much. But if you're doing
yes,
something elaborate with toys and um, something that could be a potentially risky, you really need to talk and
absolutely.
discuss,
Yes,
like, is there a safe word we can use?
of course.
Can I how much should we push? All these kinds of things. And so kink culture has very much informed mainstream vanilla culture in being more communicative. Now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
as for sex histories, you know, I began with this as an assignment for my students to make them aware of all the possible messages they were getting about sex growing up, getting
Hmm.
about masturbation, about
Right.
nudity, about, gender, all of that, all figures into how we become the sexual people we are at present and where we get our ideas about what we might like to be doing. And,
Yeah.
depending on who you've known, where you've lived, what you've read, what you've watched, you're going to have different ideas. And,
You are. You are.
certainly for what I have done with living in different parts of the world and engaging people in a variety of ways in terms of conversation and answering their questions and having them pose questions to me, it's really expanded my sense of what's possible for humans.
Yeah. And I always tell people, don't think your spouse is not talking to one of their best friends about it because they are. So it's like, if if they have a conversation with you, they're going to someone else to talk about it. I think some people get so ashamed about it and embarrassed about it,
Hmm.
and that's okay because sex could be embarrassing. It can also be great, but you have to
Hmm.
be able to break those barriers down and talk about those things and be able to really connect with one another. Which in any
Sure.
relationship, that should be the most
Hmm.
important thing about
Hmm.
anything before you do. So,
But
yeah,
not
wow.
all sex is relationship sex.
Nope,
Some of it
it's
is
not.
hookup sex. Some
It's
of it
true.
is
It's
party
true.
sex.
And that's
Some of
okay
it is
too.
fantasy
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah.
Some
And
of
that's
it is
okay.
cyber sex.
Yeah.
Some of it is solo sex. There's
Yeah.
and then, certainly not everything is with just one person. Not everything is
Yep.
heterosexual. Not
Yeah.
everything is homosexual. There's a variety. And then there's a
Absolutely.
lot of sex that has nothing to do with the genitals. Like
Very
a
true.
lot of BDSM is not genital focused.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just make yourself aware of what's out there. I love that.
Sure.
And where can everyone get your book, Leanna? Where can we find
Oh, well, my book is available through Amazon. It's available through my publisher. My
it?
publisher is Roman and Littlefield. It's available. I've Googled it and it's available through probably 30 different vendors. So
Amazing.
yeah, so it's well available. It's called 177 Lovers and Counting: My
I
Life
love it.
as a Sex Researcher.
And do you have any other projects you're working on? Anything else that's coming up in the pipelines for you?
Well, the more I do interviews and promotions related to this,
Hmm.
and I also created a solo theater show to help
Oh,
for this book. And turns
okay.
out people are coming to the show and not buying the book because I just
Okay.
enjoy the show as a show. So I'm
Yeah.
bringing the show. I live in Los Angeles, so I'm bringing the show to the Hollywood Fringe Festival in June, and so I'll have three
Wow.
performances there. I'm also sharing bits of it at conferences and such.
Yeah.
But I've been really getting the thought that I want to do something akin to being a sexual anthropologist, Dr. Ruth type, where
Oh,
I
I
get
love
to
that.
talk about all kinds of things related to how people
Yeah.
have sex in different times, different places,
Yeah.
and give folks some more reflection on how, where we are now as a society and what else is possible.
Wow. I love that. And I think that's so great. One of the things I was so upset about is that a lot of schools have taken sexual health out or is almost diminished in a way. And it's
Really.
so important. It's so important to have those conversations and understand. It's not that you're teaching kids to go have sex. Like that's not what it's about. But it's at least being aware of what's out there and understand how to protect
Sure.
yourself and how and to really know what you're getting yourself into. And it's
Yeah.
so sad that that's diminishing and leaving because we are leaving out a good chunk of health, mental health, sexual health, all these different things that are really important to your growth and understanding. And one can't function without the other because I do feel this is what, and this is probably very controversial to say. I think a lot of people who go through either being serial killers or rapists, or the case is, there was some, and if you probably looked at studies, it can be shown is that there was some kind of lack of some either knowledge or seeing some kind of trauma or sexual abuse that really triggered that maybe could have helped if that was a conversation to be talked about or looked into at such a earlier stage in someone's life. Granted, there's
Hmm.
some people who are just crazy and they go and do crazy shit, and that's life.
Yeah,
But
well,
I,
humans have been abusing each other for a very
like
long
that's
time.
that's a real thing. But I do think at
Mhm.
some point it's that level of knowledge. I think is so important to have that and be able to understand that, and be able to have those conversations, and for parents not to be so scared about that. I was very thankful. I had a great home. Our mom was very open, and she talks to me about different things. And she grew up in the Bay Area as well. So I'm a little after you, but it's I learned so much, and it's like I understand, and that kind of helped me understand certain aspects and maybe understand more of who I was and what sex should look like and what it can be. But it was really eye opening. And I really hope that people were able to still get that, or at least your book or other books out there, something to really help people understand. There
Yeah,
is resources out there to help you.
yeah. My
There are
book
things
is actually also an anthropology textbook. So if any of
amazing.
your um, listeners are taking anthropology classes this coming year, they may be assigned
Yeah.
the book, and that'd be very cool because it has even though in addition to my story, it has a
Hmm.
lot of contextual information. So it's
I love
become a
that.
textbook.
Yeah. We got to get on that bandwagon. We got to open our minds more. We got to
Hmm.
really ask those questions and be more investigative
Hmm.
and stop attacking one another and really
Mm, yeah, well,
be
that's
better
sort of
about
the
communication.
nature of your show about being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah. You got to be able to get out there and talk about these things and be able to have those conversations and be okay with that and have no shame in it. I think we have so much shame in what we do, and it's not always a shame. It's more of it's okay to ask a question when you can. And there's resources and to
Mhm.
make you be able to feel comfortable to do that. And I really hope people go out there and do that and really make sure they educate themselves on what's out there. But Leanna, thank you again so much for being on and sharing your stories and such a wealth of knowledge you've given us. I'll make sure to put the link for your book out there. I'm gonna add it to my list of books I need to read. I have a big list, not too big
Yeah,
of a list, but
definitely get
books I
a
can
hold of
read.
it. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm really
Mhm.
intrigued to learn about this. The
Mhm.
title, like I said, the title alone is intriguing. Love to have you back again. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, is there a website and we could like learn more
Yeah,
about
you
your
can
upcoming
check me out.
show?
I have a website called wisewomanSexandRelationshipConsulting.com.
Perfect. Okay. And that'd be great. And good luck on your upcoming show in June. I mean, I'm gonna have to come out to
Thank
LA and check
you.
it out.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
going to be
it's
fun.
amazing. Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thank you again. Have a good day. I appreciate you.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye.